Welcome to the Beautiful Step Podcast,
where we
run,
stomp,
tiptoe,
and tango into the confusing
but beautiful
world of togetherness. We are your hosts, Kris
and Charity.
Now, let's go make our together even better. Hey.
Hey.
Where are you right now?
I'm in Hope in our cabin.
Oh.
Where are you?
I'm in a cabin. I've been in a cabin for like 6 weeks.
A long time.
I've been stuck in this cabin for 6
you have
weeks.
been building
Yes.
next to this behind this cabin. You haven't been stuck in the cabin.
Well, yeah. But it's kind of the same.
It is.
So that's why my hair looks so good.
It does.
It's like I'm unshaven. I'm going full on cabin
full
ass.
Grizzly.
I call this look,
Okay.
I call it high bush.
Hi.
Hey. Come on. High bush. That's a thing right there. Look at me. Ooh. Got scratchy. Scratchy. I wish I could rap.
You can rap, actually, kind of.
No, I can't.
Well, maybe High Bush could be your rapper name.
Oh, you just nailed it. Nailed it. Hey. Okay, wait. Get back to Earth.
You
here.
actually,
What do we do?
You're missing your Flowbee. That's what's going on. You have a Flowbee at home, but you don't have one here.
Highly recommend a Flowbee for any human being.
It's that crazy vacuum that like sucks in your hair.
It cuts your hair and vacuums the mess at the same time.
I mean, amazing.
George Clooney uses one.
Well, so they say. I don't really think
he
George
does.
Clooney.
Have you ever seen his hair?
Yeah, which is why I don't think he uses a Flowbee.
He does. He's our like hero. Like he's our mascot, dude.
For the Flowbee guys, or what?
Yes, all of us Flowbee homies look to Clooney.
All
and
right.
we just ask him, what's next?
Okay.
Tell us what is next, Clune.
Clune.
Yeah,
You even have a short name?
He's our homie.
I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, the work's looking for you, or the look's working for you.
The look is working for me. Hey. I don't know. Anyway, what are you doing? Why are we here? What are we talking about?
We are talking about independence and autonomy.
Oh. So I've been stuck in a cabin not stuck in a cabin. I chose to come up here.
Yes.
Because that's what I chose to do.
Yeah.
And I've been here for
6
weeks. And we were apart for a month.
Which is like 3 times longer than we've ever been apart in our whole 28-year marriage.
So, and we had this conversation before I left. I was like, look, I need to go up and do this with my son. I'm going to build a house with him. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And you were not coming with me.
I was like, I like going to Hope, but I don't think I want to. I needed to get some stuff done, and it was not going to be that conducive.
So you had stuff. Mm-hmm. I really needed to do this.
Yeah.
And we came to an agreement that we were just going to be apart for like a month. And typically, like our history and what we know about marriage, relationships, and, proximity and all that kind of stuff, and even just religious, all of the red flags kind of came up. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we were like, is this a thing? Is this going to be okay and safe and healthy? And like, We've never done this because it was kind of villainized. Like we thought it wasn't really that safe. I mean, I remember actually when we were very first married, like that thought would have been so freaking scary.
Oh, I think that if we knew a couple that was like, hey, they're going to be apart for a month, I would have been like, won't last.
Well, maybe when they're first married, we would have just thought like, hey, that's not the most beneficial way to have a marriage.
I would have thought, won't last. Like, that's just trouble with it.
Well, sometimes people have to like work apart. But yeah, it was just something we weren't used to. And certainly we didn't grow up thinking was really healthy.
Right.
But it did prove to kind of be interesting and healthy for us.
Oh, dude. I was so surprised at how well I did by myself. There's this whole thing about like, if you're by yourself, no one can stand their own voice. Like they have, like, there's all this rhetoric around like being alone with yourself. These shows like Alone or Survivor, and like the worst part of it was I was by myself and alone with my own thoughts. Not me. I loved it.
Yeah, you were like playing guitar till 2 a.m. every morning.
I was like, dude, because right now we winter in Vegas.
Yeah.
And it's hectic to me. I mean, it's the pace and it feels like a big, I think Olivia calls it like a big Disneyland. It's a big giant show,
Yeah.
And so coming up here and sitting in a cabin alone with my own thoughts.
Yeah.
And by the way, I lost 20 pounds.
Oh, you're looking good. Oh.
And here's the reason why is because I didn't buy any alcohol.
Uh-huh.
I bought a case of chili.
Yeah.
And I played the guitar every night.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize.
Because the internet doesn't work that good.
Right. And I didn't realize it until later that the TV that we do have in here can get on Netflix.
But you didn't know.
I didn't know. So I was like super productive.
Yeah. I came back and you were shredding that guitar.
I learned some really cool shred stuff on guitar.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, all of that to say, it was good. But what about you? You were probably a miserable wreck the whole time I was gone.
Yes.
You probably had your head between your knees, sobbing day and night.
Yeah. Really, I was just kind of relieved that I didn't have to think about anyone else during that time period.
Hey, come on. That's nice.
No, actually, I think that's the whole thing about autonomy. I was able to work and do the thing, and I didn't have to think about, like, if I hole up here and just work and try to get this done.
All by yourself.
Am I, like, neglecting someone, or do I need to worry about, like, do I need to stop to eat and be social, or do I need to go somewhere? I didn't have to worry about any of that.
Right.
It was actually kind of nice to take a little break from that.
Right.
It wasn't even like we have a lot of kids to take care of or anything. We don't anymore. But it was still just this thing of like, I don't have anyone to worry about but me.
Right.
Which was I haven't ever had that thought in, my 40-something years of life. Honestly.
Right. So here's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Is it was good. I think we were apprehensive. I think we were curious.
Yeah.
I think we were curious. I think in many ways we were apprehensive to be away from each other for a whole month.
Yeah.
But guess what, folks? It was good.
It was good. And I think it was...
Why, though? Like,
yeah.
And start talking to me about why you think that was good.
Well, I read a lot of books. I mean, I always read a lot of books, but I was reading...
Should you flex just really quick again? How many books did you read last year, Charity? Go, please say it. Say it out loud.
I don't know how many books.
It was 150.
Oh. I don't think
it was. It was.
I always read over 100 books a year. But
okay.
I was reading while we were apart. I was reading this whole like lineage of books that weren't really related, but I kind of just kept going from one to another about decision-making processes, cognitive dissonance.
Right.
But I came along this one that was really all about autonomy and learned helplessness and and so it just kind of led me to this whole thing. And
what's the book? Catalyst.
Yeah, well, this particular one that we're actually gonna talk about a book called The Catalyst today, and then we're gonna reference another one called Learned Optimism. But let's talk about The Catalyst.
Okay,
so this idea of autonomy basically means your ability to self-direct your life. You're your independent self.
Right.
I can make my own decisions. Right. I'm not answering to somebody else about the decisions I make.
You are an autonomous being.
Yes. And you could call it independence. You could use that word for it too.
Right.
And then there's this idea of agency, being able to act. Like you actually have the authority to act. So when you say you hire an agent, like they have the authority to act on your behalf, right? So these are concepts that are really important because there's a lot of scientific study about how key that is to our life and happiness.
Autonomy?
Yes.
And agency?
Yes.
Right.
Kind of the same thing, right? They're one and the same thing. The ability to self-direct, to act on your own behalf. So
I love that. The ability to self-direct, to act on your own behalf.
Yes.
I love it.
Critical. So I'm going to cite a couple studies that I found like mind blowing.
When you
do you have like a sound effect? Probably not. But if you have, okay. Well, that's not quite the same. But if there was like a cool, is that good? Okay, that's good.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So The first
I'm
one,
gonna nail that next time, by the way.
yeah, okay. Find a big mind blowing one. Okay, yeah, oh big, yeah, yeah, okay.
Got it.
So the first study was one that was done in the 70s, and actually it was done through Harvard and Yale in the 70s. And what they did, and he references this book in The Catalyst, which is, the author is Jonah Berger, by the way, and fantastic book. He has a bunch of books that you should read, Contagious, a whole bunch of them. He's a psychologist. Anyway, so he talks about in the 70s, they do this big study, Harvard and Yale, and what they do is they take an old folks home and they break everybody up into floors. So the people in the floors are of the same kind of general health, and they're all there for, similar reasons that people would be in an assisted living home.
Right.
And they break them up though in the floors. And so the first floor, we'll call that like the freedom floor, because basically they just said to all the old people, like, you get to choose the activities you guys want to do. You just decide if you want to go to movie night or whatnot. Choose the movies you want to do.
Nice.
Choose the meals you have. They put out these potted plants and said, if you want to adopt a plant, go for it. They just gave them like whole carte blanche. You can have whatever visitors you want.
I love it.
Total freedom.
Yeah.
Right within this, but they still had assistance.
That's the kind of old folks home I'm going to end up in.
Oh, good.
Go.
And then the second floor, they said, okay, we're going to really work hard to curate like the most wonderful experience for these residents. And they kept telling them like, we chose the best movies and they're playing these nights. Here's a plant, it'll really, brighten up your room. Take care of that. Here's the meal times. You have all these times to kind of like have available, but we've chosen your meals for you. They're the best meals out there.
And
they did all this.
And the time you eat it.
Yes.
Okay.
They chose it all for them, but they chose like the most wonderful things and then told them about the most wonderful things that were chosen.
Right.
So then they did a study and they came back after a period of time.
What about the first floor?
It was just these two floors.
Oh, it's just two floors. Okay.
Okay. So they came back after a short period of time. When what they found was like that first freedom floor was like, they were so happy. They had gotten much more vibrant, more energy. They were sleeping less. They were feeling more healthy. And they were like, this is crazy. But the second floor was like, no, there wasn't any progression in it. Like they were just kind of, it was the same thing. Well, then they went further with the study, and it was a longitudinal study. So they came back 18 months later, and they said, okay, let's really test it. Does the happiness affect their mortality? Do they die different?
What?
And what they ended up finding was that on the second floor, they died at a rate of 50% more than the first floor. Or you could say that half the people died on the first floor as did on the second floor. The freedom floor died half the time that the second floor did.
Wow.
And so they can directly link this idea of being able to actually just choose. It wasn't that the options were different. It was that the choice of the people and their feeling of being able to self-direct their own lives and their choices, even at that stage when they're still at a stage of life where they need assistance, they were able to choose that. And that gave them actually much happier life, which led to more mortality or, more a longevity of life. The other crazy study, and this is the one that I think, this is not in the Catalyst book, this is in Learned Optimism, which is Martin Seligman, which he's like the father of positive psychology. And man, his work is fantastic. Yeah. He does he kind of shed the light on depression and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. If you ever can read some of his stuff, do. Anyway, he has a book called Learned Optimism, which is fantastic. But this study was really fantastic. So what they did was they took over a 20-year time period, over 300 different individual studies done at multiple universities across the world. And what they did is they used dogs. And then they ended up using rats and humans and all different beasts like people, different people groups. Yeah. And they broke them into 3 groups. And they said the first group.
So wait, there were humans as well?
Yeah, they did studies with humans as well.
Okay.
The first group, but let's just use the rat example. The first group, they said, okay, rats. They talked to the rats. They basically gave the rats in group 1 a shock thing. Like they were being shocked. Okay. But they could push a bar and the shock would stop. Okay? So they had control. They knew they figured out, if I push this bar, the shock is going to stop. Then they had a second group in with the first group. But this group was also getting the shock, but no matter how much they pushed the bar, nothing happened. Only when group 1 would push the bar did the shock stop.
Oh, wow.
And then there was a third group input. They didn't get the shock, and they also didn't have there was no reaction to their activities. They could have pushed the bar, they could have walked around, they could have stood on their head, nothing they did mattered, but they also weren't getting any of the stimulus. Okay,
I'm working this out.
Okay, so what they ended up finding was that groups 1, the rats who could stop the shock, were happy. Because even though the shock was making them run around like crazy or whatever, as soon as they figured out how they could stop it, they were fine, and they operated fine. And then they would take them out of the things, and they were totally fine, totally normal.
Right.
Group 3, who didn't have any impact, they didn't have the shock, nothing was occurring to them at all, they were totally happy. Group 2, who actually had the shock but could not control if the shock stopped, that was responsibility of the other group.
Yeah.
They became completely depressed. And we're not talking about depressed like you don't think of rats as depressed, but actually they exhibited all 8 of the major depression symptoms. Lack of sleep, stopped eating, apathy, health deteriorated.
Whoa.
Like all of these crazy things. Because they realized that no matter what they did, it didn't control the outcome. They had no control over what was happening to them.
Wow.
And that in itself created depression and unhappiness, so much so that when they actually removed them from that study and put them in different boxes and different things, they were automatically helpless like that in every other situation.
No way.
They just stopped. They didn't even try. The next box they put them into, they didn't even go for the thing. They just laid there.
No way.
So they tried the study, not just negative effects like a shock. They used humans and tried food. They did dogs and tried other things. So whether the stimulus was positive or negative, it didn't matter. That same dynamic occurred every single study of the 300 studies.
300, but okay, so who cares about a rat? But they did it with humans.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the exact same outcome.
Which is what they realized. The main reason people get depressed is when they have no ability to control their life, like when their choices are taken from them.
You take the choice from them and they die. I mean,
become, it causes, because we are born and created to self-direct our lives.
Right. That's the craziest part. Okay, so can I just sort of rehearse what you just said? So not only in sentient beings, like humans, sentient meaning you can feel and rationalize and you're logical, not only in sentient being, but in pretty much all of creation. Like there's this biological fact, a biological truth that if you do not have autonomy, if you do not have that agency,
the ability to self-direct, self-choose.
Right. If you don't have that, you will be sad first.
So sad.
You're just going to be really sad at first. And then you're going to be helpless, and then you're going to die. Right? Like, I mean,
no. And that's the thing.
That's crazy.
But how much do you think we don't recognize this? We don't know why we're depressed. We don't know why we're feeling like overwhelmed. We don't know why we feel like lost. And we can't identify that. Maybe it's because our voice and ability to self-direct has been taken, or we have advocated it or given it up at some point.
Whoa.
In certain areas. And those might be the areas we're feeling really depressed in.
Wow, that's good.
It's
crazy. So the flip side of this, the upshot of this is that if I can work from a place of autonomy, I actually might be happy. So here's this is why I'm saying this, is because I had this really cool experience being alone in a cabin.
Yeah.
I can play the guitar until 4 a.m. if I want.
Yeah.
I'm taking an outdoor shower. You know what I mean? No one around.
Yeah.
I'm eating chili and no one's telling me. And there was this really cool just sense of agency and sense of autonomy. And I'm like, man, I really needed this, like for my inner self.
Yes.
You know what I mean? For just Kris. He needed to go be with himself for a little while, which was so surprising.
Yes.
Right?
Critical. And often when we're in partnership, Don't we usually villainize that when somebody needs that?
It's like,
often that gets villainized.
Well, here's the reason why. I'm like, okay, wait. Let's stop taking this personal, right? Like,
yes.
Can we just admit that when a person needs to be autonomous and make some choices, it's actually a biological thing. It's not a thing that people should be taking personally.
Yes.
You can't help it.
Yes. And so when your partner wants to make some decisions for themselves and when they need to do things independently of you, it's not freaking about you. It's not about you.
Right.
It's about they have an inner desire to be happy.
Right. And that's the thing, is that if they can have that agency, if they can make choices, if they can do that, they're just going for their own joy. That's all they're trying to do is be happy. So I love this idea because you have these moments in marriage. I don't know if they're daily but you have these moments in marriage where you just are like, why, Charity, are you being so obstinate? Why are you so disagreeable? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why are you continually?
Yeah.
Maybe your thing, you know what? The thing I don't.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, give it to me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you change the plan after we made the plan, I'm like, no. Like, you know how long it takes me to make a plan? Anyway.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think is so helpful about this thought is that all you're doing is just exercising a biological fact.
Yeah.
You're exercising that biological truth of autonomy, and it's actually a beautiful thing.
It is beautiful, and if we can stop kind of villainizing it, stop moralizing it, and say, wait a second, there's actually something that we need to learn here.
Right.
And we're going to actually talk at the end of the podcast about really healthy ways to nurture that in each other.
Right.
But yes, it's really important to recognize how good it is. And so
it's just, okay, I'm thinking of another example. Can I just do it really quick?
Yeah.
It's like, so if you, for instance, almost as misguided as your choices can be, it feels like you end up in a state of autonomy. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
what do you mean?
Here's what I'm saying. Like, I know people who have just ended up alone. Like, let's just say they're working on an addiction or they're in an addiction, right? And they have alienated their friends. They have alienated their family. Mm-hmm. They have made all of these choices, right? And they end up actually alone. They end up in the craziest isolated autonomy. But the hard part is, like, that's what they were kind of going for the entire time.
But not they don't know.
They don't know.
But we're all working towards this thing. And I want to explain why that happens.
Isn't that crazy though?
To
think like
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Go.
Yeah. It happens because of this thing called reactance. And he talks about it in the
Who does?
In the Catalyst book. The author does in the Catalyst book.
Catalyst.
So listen, this reactance thing, it's actually, reactance is the word, and it's a psychological phenomenon where you have a negative response to someone taking away your freedom.
Okay, come on.
Or not just someone taking your freedom, but losing your freedom.
And so you're going to do whatever, I mean, you're going to start making crazy choices.
Well, right. And like, some people might call it.
Yeah, your choice meter is like, I'm going to make choices, I don't care.
Right. So reactance, some people might call it rebellion, but the actual term is like reactance. You're going to have a natural, biological, philosophical, like psychological response.
Spiritual, like whatever.
To freedom being taken, and it's going to be negative. And what ends up happening is this is why rebellion occurs, is because you'll do this thing where if someone tells you what to do, this is the craziest thing. If someone tells you what to do, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, let's say they're even telling you what to do and it's something that you already knew you were going to do, you wanted to do.
Okay.
The fact that someone told you to do it is going to automatically make your mind counter argue with why you shouldn't do it. Because someone told you to do it, or someone told you not to do it. So listen, he cites this example in Tide. He cites this.
This is biological.
Oh yeah, he cites this study where they did the Tide Pods. Remember when that crazy phenomenon of everyone was eating the Tide Pods? Okay, so it started, and it was like only a few people doing it, but like, you know, a few people had died. And so Tide was like, holy cow, we got to do something about this.
Right.
So they decided to launch like a PR campaign and got this like famous person to go out there and be like, do not eat Tide Pods. They're
Whatever
only
you
for
do,
laundry,
They look delicious, but don't eat them. Yeah.
Within like 12 days of that ad airing, twice as many people had died of.
No way.
Yeah, or like it was like 5 more people had died of eating Tide Pods. They were seeing all this. And within, I think it was like 5 months or something, twice as many people had died of eating Tide Pods than had died in the last, like, it was a long time before that. So what ended up happening is their ad to tell people not to eat Tide Pods greatly increased.
That's just my telephone.
Oh my goodness.
It's my son. We'll answer it later. Come on, you have me at Tide Pods. This is so crazy.
He's going to keep calling back.
No, he won't. Seriously, go.
It greatly increased people eating Tide Pods because of this reactance.
So crazy.
This reactance thing. People.
No. It's like this. It's like Tide was like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna take some choices from these folks.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa! If you brush up against my
Yeah.
Who are you to tell me I can't eat a Tide Pod?
Yes.
That is insane.
And they did the same thing with like anti-smoking campaigns and all of that. They no matter how many times they study it, as soon as you tell people what to do, forget it, they're going to do the opposite thing. And the reason it happens is because as soon as I somehow rebel, what ends up happening is like my choice to do that, to even counter argue, even in my mind, gives me back control over my life. It internally makes me feel like I'm self-directing again.
So when your partner is obstinate, maybe you could say, well, they're just trying to control their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're just like, when they're being counter or whatever, they're just trying to control their life, and they're really just trying to be happy.
Yes.
I mean, how awesome is that to diffuse those crazy taking it way too personal, why are you always out to get me idea, when it's like, no, you just are working that out in your own agency, right?
Yes.
Your own.
Yeah. And so you can really do this. It's beautiful. You can do it in a healthy way. So he brings up a couple of good examples of ways to kind of combat this. And he has an example of like,
Yo, can I just say how empowering that is?
It's so empowering.
Okay, go. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and actually, let's just be clear. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which is probably one of the more predominant psychology, practices.
Right. And there's stuff out there that says it's not effective, and then there's stuff that says it is. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's very well adopted. But you'll see people with like rubber bands. They'll snap them, or like they have ways to divert, like to pay attention to the thought. All cognitive behavioral therapy is doing is reminding you that when you're triggered to have a thought that is disempowering and is going down in a negative spiral, to remind yourself, snap yourself and remind yourself that you actually have the power to change the thought.
Come on.
Now, what that's doing is speaking to this agency idea. It's speaking to the idea like, oh no, you get to choose how you're thinking. You get to choose what you do. And that's all cognitive behavioral therapy is doing, is it's telling you like, redirect yourself to know that you have agency, you have power, you can choose different right now, your thought, your action, your your behavior.
Right.
And that's what that's built on.
That's so beautiful.
Which is crazy.
Okay, so can we start getting in the weeds just a little bit?
Yeah, we're going to go over some tools. So
But I want to do something before we do that.
Okay.
Can I just say that this is actually a controversial thought?
Yeah.
And it's because, I mean, we grew up in a Western world, right?
Yep.
With Western
America.
With Western religion.
Yep.
With Western psychology.
Yep.
With, Western everything, right? And so this whole idea brushes up against a lot of spiritual ideas and rhetoric in that, and even psychological, because how many times have you heard like, don't operate from ego?
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It's that whole thing of like,
right now there's so many ego books, anti-ego books. Yeah.
It's like, everyone is, be self-forgetful.
Yep.
Think of yourself less. Not, it's all of this jargon and rhetoric that's wrapped around if you can have less of a sense of self, you will have more happiness.
Yeah.
And this is actually contrary to that very thing. I mean, think about this. Can I just go off for a second because I'm a religion major from Harvard Divinity and Extension School? I want to just say, like, think it through, even from a Christian perspective, right? Christ shows up and he's like, you know, what does it take to be saved? Well, you have to give your life over to Jesus, right? Or he who loses his life will find it.
Yes.
Like, you have all of this.
Yeah.
You know, get less self, right? If you look at Buddhism, whether it's Indian Buddhism or it's Eastern Buddhism in China and that, all of the Buddhist philosophers, Dignaga, Vasubandhu, all of these guys are going to say, you should not have a sense of self.
Right.
Because self is actually the reason why you suffer and the reason why life is so hard and the reason why you get so, you know, demanding or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know? And so I just feel like it's actually, at some point, if you decide that autonomy is an actual biological thing that you are not going to be able to get away from, you have to decide, like, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if it is good, then you can see it as a good thing in other people.
I love that. Yeah.
And now I'm not saying that a person should just be completely selfish, but I do think this sense of agency where you can say, no, I actually am in control of what I give. Generosity.
That's the key.
I want to give myself
Yeah.
to my wife.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's me doing it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Because what happens is, I think, especially within those religious constructs, what you have is, particularly for women, you know, I'll just speak for women.
Right.
I think within the religious context I grew up in,
Yeah.
you have this structure where you're saying, like, the wife is living for the family. She becomes and lays down her life for her spouse and her children and her people. And what ends up happening, and that's not a bad thing if she chooses that.
Right.
But there may be elements of it that she didn't choose.
Of course.
And it's hard to split that up. It's hard to identify that. And what I want to point out is that sometimes what happens is, the reason we feel lost as people is we might actually go into that situation thinking we're only giving up some of ourselves, or like we're we're choosing this.
Right.
We're choosing this life. But then there's elements of it where we didn't get a choice. It has maybe taken further than we wanted to go with that giving it up.
Right.
For instance, I might say, well, I'm choosing to be this person, Kris's wife, his partner in life. What I didn't choose was Kris as my boss.
Right.
Kris as my authority.
Right.
That's not what I chose. In fact, what I went into that agreeing to at the time, I didn't quite understand. But I think what I'm trying to point out is that sometimes we go in thinking that we are making the decision about what to lay down or to give up our voice in a certain area or whatever. And we don't realize that it's not that everybody gave up their voice in the area. It's that some people actually asserted and told us what we were going to be
right.
in those things.
Right.
And it just kind of happens. And then slowly we're like, wait a second. Wait, I don't think I like, and I think it happens inside religious texture and outside. We can all adopt identities. Aristotle talks about this, where it's like you could have these temporary, he calls them something different, but you could have these temporary identities where it's like you paint a house, the house is still a house.
Right.
Or you could have a fundamental change where the house burns down and it's just ashes.
Right.
But, the thing is, with identity, I was telling you, well, once I became a mother, I'm kind of always a mother.
Right.
Except you said something really interesting to me.
Yeah. So here's the idea that I love, right? So there's this Buddhist philosopher, Santideva, who brought in this thought of dependent origination. I think I've talked about this before, maybe in another podcast, but basically it's this idea of that you don't have an intrinsic self, because in intrinsic self, what I mean is like you're autonomous. Like that whole thing is like, there's no way you're autonomous because you're born into a world completely dependent on everything that is around you. You're dependent on air. You're dependent on vitamin C. Without one of these things, you don't exist anymore.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this whole idea is, and I love that idea because it makes you actually very empathetic. It makes you like a naturalist. Like you can start to actually take care of the earth because you are dependent on it.
Right.
So I do believe.
Do Hindus do this too?
Hindus do. Yeah.
Okay.
The dependent origination is just this really, I think it's a really fascinating thought.
Okay.
But I will say, where they take that is the only things that are real, actually real in the universe, have to meet 3 criteria. One is it has to be unchanging.
Okay.
It has to be permanent. And it has to be independent of anything else.
What fits that criteria?
And that's just it. It's like when you start to think about it, you're like, well, I'm a human, so that doesn't play. Because like you were just saying, you know, here you were a mom, you are a mom, but you weren't at one point.
Yeah.
And so you have all of these things that you've undergone, like all of these changes. Like I've been a carpenter and I've had, you know, whatever those things are. But I would just say this, that yes, so much of your essence changed when you became a mother. But guess what? Charity became a mother. And I truly believe that you are a being that is made in the image of God. Like you are actually created as Charity, as a beautiful, permanent, unchanging, independent being.
Yeah.
That is absolutely beautiful. And I believe that you will endure, right? And I think every single person listening to this podcast is a permanent, unchanging, beautiful, independent person. And it's like God is telling us this through all of this biological research that we are autonomous.
Yeah.
And so we should get used to it, man. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like,
these things could change. Charity could become a mother. Charity could become a whatever, but you're saying I'm still Charity.
Yes, you're still Charity. And I'm sorry to preach, but I'm not going to apologize for preaching. That is like, I think, such a beautiful thing. And this helps me so much when you are being obstinate, or, you know what I mean? Or I'm like, I have to get away. I have to go do something, like be by myself, because I'm this unchanging, permanent Kris that's independent, and that's good.
Yes, and has your own desires and characteristics and things.
Yeah.
So let's debunk the whole debunk the whole like we're halves of one whole.
Exactly.
All of that BS. We're whole people created just the way we're supposed to be, and whether you choose to partner with somebody or not, great. But they don't complete you. They do not complete you.
But I will say, I love the way you change me.
Absolutely, and I love the way you change me.
Right.
But
you would not be half the person you are if it weren't for me, baby. You got lucky. You got lucky. Hey. You know, but seriously,
I would still be my whole person, though. I
know.
And you would
still
too.
Charity. That's the beautiful thing. Like, and that's a choice that I've made, to believe that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe that because it is self-evidencing. Like it is, the universe is screaming this at me.
And I think all you have to do is look around at the people you have in your life that might be really experiencing an identity crisis or depression. And I think you could link it back to, at some point, freedom felt lost.
Absolutely.
That ability to self-direct.
Oh, it's so good. Like I look at Nash, my grandson, and he is a powerful little young man. Like he is so awesome in that, like he becomes immovable.
He's so opinionated. Sassy.
I love it.
He's sassy.
And his parents are worried about this, right? But I'm a grandpa, right? And so when I see him and he's operating in that way. Before you and I talked this through, and before we actually did work on autonomy, before I just kind of knew something really good was happening in him. And I kept telling Jesse, I was like, he's just exercising his power.
You did say that from the time he was like 2.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I love watching him just be powerful. But now I'm realizing he really is just exercising his choices. And he's getting really deeply in touch with this whole idea of being an autonomous creature and beautiful.
I love this. And this is, okay, so this is really critical. So let's get into the tools because
I could sit and talk about
I love that. These are really,
Isn't it so
it's
good?
important, and it is important to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand how to navigate this in a healthy way, because it doesn't just apply to partners. It applies to your kids, like parenting, and people you love in your life, helping them like figure this out. So you actually mentioned,
and again, this is so empowering.
Yes.
Oh,
you mentioned my obstinance, but you bring up Nash. You know, you could have somebody in your life that you feel like is disagreeable.
Right.
So in the Catalyst book, he brings up this example where he's like, the one guy was talking and he says, I'm so irritated because my wife wants me to decide where we're going to go to dinner. But then every time I throw out like, hey, let's go to Don Jose's, she's like, nah, that doesn't sound good. Like they'll go through.
That might be the worst part of marriage.
He'll go through.
What do you want to eat? What do you want to eat? Where do you want to eat? I don't know. You choose.
He'll go through like 5 or 6 things. And she shoots them all down. But you might have a partner who's like this. Some people just have partners who will like immediately will like shoot down everything. And then you're all pissed off about it. And you're like, forget it. Well, here's the thing. The reason that's happening psychologically is just because they are like, I need some choice in this. And you're giving me one choice, but you're kind of asserting that might be the. So what this guy did was he actually just gave them a menu.
No way.
So this is the first tool. Provide a menu.
I love it.
For your spouse, for your partner, for your kids, for whoever. Provide a menu. If you have somebody that you feel like there's a barrier there. You're seeing some reactance. Provide a menu. Hey, would you like to go to Don Jose's Thai food down the corner, pizza? What are those 3 sound good?
Okay, so can I just interject?
Okay.
I love this. So when I was when Olivia and I, my daughter, would want to go on like father-daughter date. Yeah. Because that's so good just to be out with your daughter.
Well, and you guys are 2 peas in a pod.
Oh, and we would most of the time just sing Harmony in the cab of the truck and just drive around town. Yeah. But and I miss that. We need to do that again. That's so fun. Anyway, but we had this problem. Olivia and I would have this problem where it'd be like, okay, baby, where do you want to eat? And she'd be like, I don't know. It's like your date or whatever. And I'm like, no, it's me taking you out and I want you to choose. And so we'd get like in this thing. And then I would be like, okay, well, we're going to go here or here. And it got, it's like, oh, I don't want that, So here's what I did. This is such good dad advice.
Okay, right, bring it.
I told her, I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to 3 places. I'm going to drive to 3 different places. I'm not going to tell you what they are. Okay. But the chances of one of these being a gas station is very good. So when we go to the place, you can tell me we're going to stop and eat. This is where we're going to eat. Mm-hmm. But by the way, like you don't know what's next. Mm-hmm. So... And I like gas station food sometimes. I do. They have those little Spam things that have been there for like 4 days that have like the rice on top and the seaweed.
Masubi like, or whatever?
Masasubi or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
Nasty.
That's how I dealt with that. And it became really fun.
Oh, yeah. It's like a game.
It was a total game.
But what it does.
The menu.
Providing the menu gives the person the sense of like, I get to control, I get to choose, right. Even if it's only a few options. You don't go into a restaurant and there's a bazillion, everything you ever wanted to eat you can choose from. Right. You have a menu.
Unless you're at Cheesecake Factory. Have you ever seen the book that they bring out? I'm like, so okay. True. I didn't realize I had to study. Like, good night.
Anything you ever want. So provide a menu. That's a really good way to handle it. Yeah. And then ask, don't tell. Be constantly asking questions instead of asserting like things, instead of telling somebody about what's going to happen or asking questions. And here's a key to asking questions.
I love it.
That he gives in the book. Don't use why. As soon as you say like, why did you feel like you need
I hate it when people do that to me. Because I'm like, now I have to explain myself existentially. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know why I did that.
Well, here's the thing. Why puts people on the defensive right away? Yeah. Why always puts people on the defensive. So try not to use why. Also try not to use yes or no questions or things where it's like either or, where they can just easily choose one or the other. Try to use open-ended questions where you're constantly asking, like, so how did you feel about that? Or what happened next? Or
so what's going on there? Why would you do that? Like, what's the whole point of that?
So that you're keeping them talking, you're keeping them engaging, and they're getting to voice their own opinions, their own life.
Yeah, they're operating in that natural autonomous state where they're saying what their world is and how they view things, and
So whether it's your kids or your partner, open-ended questions,
come on.
Lots of them. Keep asking, well, what next? Well, then what happened? Well, what did you think about that? Well, then what did they say?
That's beautiful.
These are open-ended questions. Avoid why, avoid yes, no.
You know what? Another one that you said the other day that I loved. You're saying, I'm switching out the word "but" with "and."
Yes.
That's such a good thought.
I love that. To say, instead of like, well, that, you could go out of the house in that, but, or you could be like, you could go out of the house in that, and you could also put on these pants underneath that skirt that shows your ass. Like, you could go in this.
Let's do a little "and" here. That's so funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
as a parent, learn and
that helps. I love "and."
Learn "and."
I love "and" instead of "but." That's so good.
It's really good.
Again, it comes back to that whole thing of you're letting them choose, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's so important.
Yeah. And
why didn't we know this when we raised
God.
our kids and jack them up so?
Oh, we did not give enough choices to our children.
Well, we were just so.
We didn't give enough choices to each other. We weren't. All of these things were kind of scary.
It was scary, and I kept taking it personally. Like when I would be like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not good enough," and you have to keep coming.
Everything is personal.
Things.
Everything is personal, and everything. Honestly, you think well, I'll speak for myself. I thought I just knew better, and then I'm like, advanced 20 years, and you're like, I didn't know shit. What was I doing? Like, why did I think I knew better all the time? Honestly, why did I feel like I knew better?
And what's crazy right now at age 50, like, because when you're 19, when you're 30 and you look at your 19-year-old self, you go, what a dipshit. Right?
Yeah.
And then now at 50, we look at ourselves at 30 and we go, what a dipshit. Yeah. Right? And then when we're 100, we're going to look at her like, what about now? Okay.
Totally.
We're almost 50. So we're still
Which
dipshits.
is kind of why I want to be in the state of like, I want to live in the state of like, I don't want to assume that I'm the expert. I want to assume that like who I'm talking to is the expert on their own life and their decisions and their opinions.
Right.
And let them be that.
Wait, babe, wait. How do we end this?
By saying thank you.
Okay, you guys are awesome. Thank you. There's nothing more encouraging than you hitting that like button and commenting.
And don't forget to subscribe.
And I know there's more. You have a list. Might as well go down the list.
Right. Okay. Watch the video of this podcast on our Beautiful Step YouTube channel or on our website where you can actually download transcripts and show notes of the episode. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
If today's episode made your together even better, tell someone.
Okay, now.
Right now.
Today.
Okay.
You can take one step.
It's just one step.
Toward the beautiful relationship you want in your life.
You got this.